So first of all, to just answer the question, is it bad to get an extension? No. The answer is no. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative or soul-centered entrepreneur or wellness practitioner who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, welcome. Today, I want to talk about a question I get a lot, which is it bad to get an extension on my taxes? So a lot of people at this time of year, as we get close to the tax deadline, are realizing that for one reason or another, they cannot get their taxes done by the deadline. Or you may have submitted your information to your accountant long ago, and you may have just been told by your accountant that they're putting you on extension. So let's talk about maybe what's happening with that accountant. I want to just talk to you about what it actually means to get a tax extension. So first of all, to just answer the question, is it bad to get an extension? No. The answer is no. It's perfectly legal. It's perfectly fine. It does not mean that you're late. So as long as you apply for a tax extension, you will automatically be granted one. Now, I do want to warn you, if you don't apply to get the tax extension, then you are going to be late the day after the tax deadline. So that is something you really need to be careful about. An extension is automatically granted when you apply. So don't miss that little detail there, okay? And I'm happy to put a link in the show notes to the place where you can fill out a free deadline extension application at the IRS in the show notes. So what does it mean? First of all, it's really important for you to understand that all taxpayers are granted an automatic extension of time to file so long as you apply for an extension. Now, I want to make really clear to you that filing and paying are two different things, okay? You can get an extension of one, but not the other. So this is a key understanding that you need to know. You can have 6 extra months to file your taxes, to fill out the paperwork, right? And that gets you, if the tax deadline is normally April 15th, this year it happens to be the 18th because the 15th falls on a weekend. But an automatic extension is going to extend your tax deadline to October 15th, right? Gives you 6 months to file the paperwork. Now, does that extend your payment deadline? No, it doesn't. So beware of that part. Now, if you had a refund coming, it's okay. It doesn't matter because you didn't owe tax. If you've already paid the tax you owe, there isn't anything to worry about. But if you're listening to this show, the reason is probably because you are self-employed. And if you are self-employed, the chances are good you have not completely caught up with all of your tax payments. You may owe a substantial amount of money. So beware, your extension does not extend your payment time. So you do, as you submit your extension, you are expected and required to make a payment to the IRS about, that is the approximate amount that you think you owe, right? Now, of course, we know that you're not going to know exactly what that number is, right? Because you don't know how much you actually owe until you do your taxes. It's the filing is the reconciliation where you discover the difference between what you paid the year before and what you actually end up owing. And so the tax filing, the whole purpose of it is to see what the difference between those two numbers is and to reconcile it, right? If you overpaid last year, you will get a refund by the overpayment amount. If you underpaid last year, you will receive a bill for the underpayment amount and you will have to pay that. You'll have to settle up. Okay. So you must file the extension. You also must make a payment about what you think you owe. You have to approximately get a sense of what you owe and pay that in. Okay. You're going to pay at the IRS website. So irs.gov, and there's a big button that says make a payment. So you're going to click that button. And you're going to do the drop down. And this is the payment for your 2022 taxes. Because remember, taxes are retroactive. We do them after that year has finished. So now that it's 2023, you are paying for your 2022 tax payment. Okay. Now, while we're mentioning making a payment on the IRS website, also on the same day that your tax payment is due, April 15th, or this year it's the 18th, you also have a second thing due, which is your first quarterly tax payment. So when you're self-employed, you are required to pay your taxes quarterly, not annually. And your first payment for the first quarter of 2023 is also due. So while we're talking about that little drop-down menu on irs.gov, where you click the button, make a payment, you will make your payment for last year's taxes, 2022 taxes, and then you'll want to go make a second payment. You're going to do the drop-down menu again, and you're going to hit 2023 ES, 1040 ES, and the ES stands for estimates. And that will attribute the next payment you make to your first quarter estimated quarterly tax payment. It is actually very important that you get that drop-down menu right, because if you accidentally hit the wrong button, the IRS doesn't know to attribute it to the thing you actually intended to be paying for. So if you clicked 2022 taxes or pay my tax and you thought you were paying your first quarter payment, the system is not going to register that you ever made a tax payment for your first quarterly tax payment. So you want to be careful with that. So you get an automatic extension of time to file, but not an automatic extension, never an extension of time to pay. Okay, so you do get 6 extra months to do the actual paperwork. Now, why do people get extensions? This is because, you can't get your paperwork done in time for the deadline. And sometimes there is nothing you can do to avoid this. I know people get very distraught when they have to file an extension, and they often think it's really bad or somehow that it makes them have a black mark on them from the IRS. And that is not true. It is perfectly legal and totally okay. So please settle your brain about that one. It's all right. It's perfectly legal. It's fine. There's nothing late about you as long as you have that extension filed. Okay. The request for an automatic extension. Now, what are some reasons that people end up getting extensions? A really classic reason that in our tax practice, we often really have to file extensions for people for is, for example, if you are part of a partnership or if you get a K-1 from somewhere, right? Typically, you get a K-1 when you are a partner or an owner of a business and there's a business tax return. A business tax return for a pass-through entity creates a product called a K-1. And your K-1 is your income and expenses from your stake in a business. And a lot of times, if that business tax return hasn't been filed yet, there's no K-1. And you cannot file your taxes without that K-1. So that's a real classic, right? If somebody got an extension for the partnership tax return, the S-Corp tax return, and no K-1 has been produced yet, there's nothing you can do. You have to file for an extension. That's the only way you can go. Some other reasons might be just that you don't have your documents together. Maybe you're missing another document. Maybe you had a dispute with an employee over, or an employer over a W-2 that had some wrong information in it. Maybe they're reissuing, so you can have little blips in paperwork that will force you to need an extension. Also, just if you're not organized and you don't have together the numbers you need, for example, if you haven't actually completed your bookkeeping yet for 2022, you might need to file an extension to give yourself a little more time. You don't get infinite time, so you want to get it done as soon as you can. Also, crypto is notoriously difficult. If you are one of those people, I am not, and I don't advocate this, but if you are a person who's been trading in crypto and you have a lot of transactions, it may suddenly hit you at tax time that you have a real accounting nightmare on your hands. So a lot of times I see people who've got a lot of crypto trades trying to work out exactly what their cost basis was for the various crypto trades. As a little side note on the crypto thing, in 2023, so this is the first year that crypto brokerages are actually required to do reporting. So you are probably getting some brokerage statements that you never got in the past because that just became law. I also, just as a little sidebar here, I've seen a few of these and they don't look that accurate to me. So I'm going to be totally honest. I think we need a little bit more standards in the crypto industry, especially around reporting. Anyway, that's a little sidebar. All right. There is a theory that is going around, that's often been tossed around by tax practitioners about extensions. I think it may be something that tax practitioners like to say to their clients when they put a whole bunch of clients onto extension. And I do not know if this is true or not. So maybe I shouldn't even say it here, but I'll tell you what the theory is. The theory is that the IRS selects, has X amount of capacity to conduct audits of taxpayers, and that they, maybe from the bulk of tax returns, which get submitted by the April deadline, that they select some majority amount of the audits that they're going to perform. And the theory goes that if you're on extension, you're in this pool that has a lower rate of audit, right? Anyway, this is a theory. I'm not saying that this is true. In fact, it's not even possible to know if it's true. But anyway, it's a pet theory of many tax practitioners. The real story is if you have a pulse in a tax return, you are subject to audit on any given year. That is the check and balance in our system. That is fair. That is right. And so you should expect that your stuff can be audited at any time. All right. Okay, we've covered the automatic extension. We've covered the fact that it's not an extension of time to pay. We've covered the fact that your first quarter tax payment, estimated quarterly tax payment, is also due on the same date, the April 15th, or in 2023, April 18th deadline. Another thing, so I've talked about the triple deadline of April before, but I also want you to know that if you're putting money into your IRA, please go see the Pay Yourself First, How to Fund Your IRA episode for more detail on this topic. But I also want you to know that the April tax deadline is the deadline to put money into your traditional or Roth IRA. So even if you do get an extension, I want you to be warned that you need to fund your IRA before the April date. Okay, so don't assume you get an extension of that. If you're accustomed to maxing out your IRA every year, which is what I want for all of you, then I want you to make sure you put that money in before the April date, because that's your deadline. Now, there's one little wrinkle on IRA funding that is kind of funny. So if you have a SEP IRA, a SEP stands for Simplified Employee Pension, SEP IRA. This is something that is available to people who are self-employed. And so if you have a business, you are allowed to put up to 20% of your Schedule C profit into a SEP IRA, which is awesome. If you earn over $30,000 in profit for the year, that means that you can put quite a bit more into a SEP IRA than you could put into a Roth or traditional IRA. So, little piece of strategy here. If you want to stash away more money, tax advantage, tax sheltered, a SEP is a great choice for freelancers. And interestingly, the SEP IRA is one IRA whose deadline does get extended if you have an extension. Now, why would that be? The reason for that, really, it's pretty logical if you think about it. Because the SEP IRA funding limit is based on your actual number that you report on your Schedule C, we can't know what the number is for you to put into your SEP to max it out until you do your tax return. So because you're entitled to a tax extension, and if you decide you want to have a SEP IRA, you are allowed up until the extension deadline only for a SEP IRA, not a traditional or a Roth. So be careful. But if you have a SEP IRA, you're allowed to put money into that up to the October 15th deadline if you're on extension. And that's because there is no way to know what 20% of your Schedule C is until you actually file the paperwork with your Schedule C, which is your tax return. So, little interesting wrinkle for you there. So I hope this has been really helpful for you. This is kind of a short and sweet episode, but I just want you to know that I don't want you to freak out if you are on extension, if you've been extended by your tax practitioner. I mean, I will say, I think there's a little bit of a bad habit among tax practitioners to just take in, sort of filter feed all the tax returns they possibly can, way more than they could possibly do by the April deadline. And just all the ones they don't get to, they just put on extension. That is the model of a lot of tax firms. So, it's not always because you needed to have an extension. Sometimes it's more about the capacity of the place that you're working. But I do want to just settle you and say that you are fine. Now, if you do work with an accountant and you have been put on an extension and you do want to fund your IRA, for example, you better send them a note, tell them that, and make sure that you go and fund your IRA before the April deadline. And don't forget to make a payment and make your first quarterly payment on the deadline as well. All right. I hope that's helpful to you. If you're listening to this and you're feeling like all of this has been a little bit of a mess this year and you wish you could do your taxes better, feel more organized, maybe even just feel a little more empowered about what the hell is going on in your tax return, maybe how to organize your numbers in a better way. I just recorded a live training just yesterday, and it's the best one I've ever done. It's more concise. I really streamlined it. I kept it to an hour, whereas often I go over an hour. And so if you're interested in just taking a really empowering class where I talk you through some of the common confusions and mistakes that people make when it comes to organizing for taxes and setting up retirement, I welcome you to just take a watch of that class. You can go see it. Of course, it's a recording now. It's not live. You can go see it at go.sunlighttax.com/register. You need to register to be able to see it, but you can pick a time that you want to watch it and take a watch, and you will feel a little better understanding of your taxes. And let me know what you think. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.